Now we're going to look at chapter 2, which is step 2, reattribute. Unlocking your brain. Step 1 again was relabel. Step 2 is reattribute. Step 3 is refocus. And step 4 is revalue. So now we're going to go into reattribute. Step 2, reattribute. Answers the question, why don't these bothersome thoughts, urges, and behaviors go away? Why do they keep bothering me? What should I attribute them to? The answer is that they persist because they're symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, a condition that has been scientifically demonstrated to be related to biochemical imbalance in the brain that causes your brain to misfire. There is now strong scientific evidence that in OCD, a part of your brain that works more like a gear shift in a car is not working properly. Therefore, your brain gets stuck in gear. As a result, it's hard for you to shift behaviors. Your goal in the reattribute step is to realize that the sticky thoughts and urges are due to your bulky brain. See figure 1 on page. They have a figure here called The Far Side by Gary Larson. Professor Landquist, in a seminar on compulsive thinkers, illustrates his brain stapling technique. So this is the brain stapling technique figure. It's a picture done by Gary Larson. This is what it looks like. Yeah. So you can see the board and then the doctor as well as the audience in the picture. So with a bow to Professor Landquist in this chapter, you will learn about our brain stapling technique for overcoming the symptoms of OCD. Our method, I hasten to add, has nothing to do with little mental clips. At UCLA, we use self-directed behavioral therapy as a brain stapling technique. In other words, we use the mind's own power to actually change the chemistry in the brain. That's what you get to accomplish when you get around those intrusive thoughts that get stuck in your brain and won't go away. Our tools are the 4 steps: relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue. In time, with persistence, they will enable you to staple off that hyperactive orbital cortex. No neurosurgery is needed. You can do it with your mind. When I talk about self-directed behavioral therapy, I mean an active response to OCD symptoms in which you recognize this intruder for what it is, and you fight back using the 4 steps to shift those sticky gears in your brain. Step 1, relabel. You learned the importance of calling an obsession an obsession, a compulsion a compulsion. But relabeling alone does not make those painful thoughts and urges go away. You wonder, why the hell does this thing keep bothering me? It keeps bothering you because you have a glitch in your brain, the sticky automatic transmission that you learned about in the introduction. Now it's time to bring into play step 2, reattribute. You have already identified your problem as OCD. In reattribute, you learn to place a lot of the blame squarely on your brain. This is my brain sending me false messages. I have a medical condition in which my brain does not adequately filter my thoughts and experiences, and I react inappropriately to things that I know make no sense. But if I change the way I react to the false message, I can make my brain work better, which will improve the bad thoughts and feelings. So basically, in the reattribute step and in the relabel step, they do show a lot of the cause and conditions being, of course, a chemical imbalance. We saw that the prefrontal cortex actually overheats when there's OCD, and then we see that there's a chemical imbalance in the brain from that prefrontal cortex that keeps reheating and being a biochemical imbalance. Then we also see that there's a misfiring of the brain. There's a transmission that's misfiring in your brain that also causes the false messages and false misfiring. which is also a reason why there is a biochemical imbalance because of the misfiring, and there is a biochemical imbalance because of the reheating, the heating up of your prefrontal cortex. So there is that, as well as misfiring to be a part of the chemical reimbalance. So the chemical imbalance and the biochemical imbalance is basically tied to this whole thing. And then they emphasize in the reattribute step that if you change the way you react to the false message, you can make your brain work better, which will improve the bad thoughts and feelings. So now we're going to look at it's not me, it's my brain. Because these thoughts and urges make your life unbearable, you must devise active, positive strategies for working around them. You need to adapt to keep telling yourself, it's not me, it's just my brain. I would never tell a person with Parkinson's disease, stop, stop that tremor. Don't move until you stop that tremor. You would never say that to someone with Parkinson's disease. That person cannot wish the shakes away, just as the person with OCD cannot wish away the false messages that the brain is bombarding him or her with. Both have a medical condition to which they must adjust. It is interesting to note that both Parkinson's disease and OCD are caused by disturbances in the brain structure called the stratum. It's futile and it's futile and counterproductive for the persons with Parkinson's disease to decide, oh, I'm no damn good, I can't move fast as everybody else. And it's equally counterproductive for a person with OCD to give in to say, this thing's too monstrous, too powerful, I can't fight it, so I'll just do as it tells me. Earlier, I introduced the concept of the impartial spectator or mindful awareness. Using the impartial spectator, you can distance yourself from your OCD, create a gap for a safety zone between your will, your holy internal spirit, and your unwanted intrusive urges. Rather than respond to urges in an unthinking, mechanical fashion, you present yourself with alternatives. Early in the therapy, it's good to think of some alternative behaviors you have ready when the pain of OCD seizes you. Any pleasant and constructive activities will do. Hobbies are especially good. The reattribute step intensifies the mindful awareness process. Once you realize this thing is OCD, the next step is to gain a deep understanding of why it's so bothersome and why it won't go away. We now know beyond a reasonable doubt that it doesn't go away because if it's due to a medical condition, a biochemical imbalance in the brain. By reattributing the pain to this medical condition, you strengthen your certainty that it's not your will, not you, and that it won't take over your spirit. You are still intact and able to make conscious, considered decisions in response to your pain. So here it's interesting that they tied like Tourette's syndrome and Parkinson's disease as a misfiring and issue in the brain that's similar to the OCD issue, with the OCD misfiring and those diseases misfiring and showing like the same parts of the brain being affected, and there being a misfiring in the same parts of the brain for all of these diseases. It's cool to see that all of Parkinson's disease, Tourette's syndrome, and OCD is all a biochemical imbalance in the brain, and they're all similar in that sense. That's pretty interesting. And it's really interesting that you can see that this biochemical imbalance in the brain is something that you can change yourself as well, by following the 4-step program, and also following closely to the second step, which is reattributing the pain because of this medical condition. And you strengthen your certainty that it is not your will, not you, that it won't take over your spirit. And for OCD, you are still intact and able to make conscious, considered decisions in response to your brain, in response to your pain from the OCD. So now we're gonna look at false alarm. A woman in my weekly OCD therapy group said it so well. Behavioral therapy breaks the lie of what anxiety is saying. In other words, the intensity and pervasiveness of those thoughts or urges is not a personal weakness or a psychological problem. It's simply a false alarm caused by a short circuit in the brain. Interesting. A false alarm caused by a short circuit in the brain. So a lot of this is something that is not your fault. Is basically it's showing that it's the brain who's doing this false alarm, the short circuit. And thinking of this analogy should help you understand the proper response to these urges. In the middle of the night, a car alarm goes off. It wakes you and you become agitated and annoyed. But only a fool would lie in bed tossing and turning, trying to will that alarm to cease. It won't. In all probability, it is responding to a short circuit that has caused a false message. So the sensible person tries to ignore the alarm, think about something else, and go back to sleep. When OCD sends a false message to your brain, you can't make it go away, but you don't have to act on it. First, you relabel it, then you reattribute it. You tell yourself, I will not do this. I do not want to do this. It's not me. It's just OCD. In combating compulsions, we have had success using the 15-minute rule. When you're overtaken by the urge to perform a compulsion, you try to wait 15 minutes. But this is not just passive waiting. It's a waiting period during which you actively keep telling yourself, these are not real thoughts. These are faulty messages from my brain. If within 15 minutes the urge begins to fade, and it frequently does, you begin to see that you have a sense of control over your OCD. You are no longer a passive victim. It's pointless to sit and ruminate about how dreadful your life is going to be if you act on a fearsome, violent, obsessive thought. You are not going to do it. Why not? Because the real you doesn't want to do it. Think of heavy smokers who have quit for their health's sake. They may never be free from the urge to smoke a cigarette, but they can stop smoking by changing their behavior in response to that urge to smoke. Over time, the urge to smoke fades. Remember, OCD is not some hidden wish fulfillment. It is simply a broken machine. OCD may mimic the feeling of reality, but reality never mimics the feeling of OCD. This fact leads to a very important principle. If it feels like it might be OCD, it is OCD. If it were reality, it wouldn't feel like it even might be OCD. It feel like it even might be OCD.